Hi, and welcome back to another MLS Updater. And today I'm joined once again by Victor Araiza. Victor, great to have you back on. How are you? Happy New Year.
Hey, Michael, Happy New Year. Always glad to be here with the MLS Updater. And yeah, we'll see what this 2023 has in store.
Exactly. Now, everyone who's heard before and who follows you online, you're a great person to discuss Houston Dynamo, one of the followers and one of the
Thank
reporters
you.
for thestriker.com. Before we get going, remind everyone where they can find you, just so that we can all make sure that we're all fully tuned in.
Yeah, like you said, thestrikers.com, that's kind of the destination to go. We have coverage of several MLS cities here in Houston, Dallas, Austin, the LA market just got added last year, as well as Atlanta. Sam Jones does a great job there. So um, some of it is behind the subscription. So, but there is a 30-day trial for the first month if anybody wants to try it out. But a lot of it now we've also started getting some free content out there. So I invite everybody to kind of check it out and see what you think of it.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, we'll get a link out to that for everyone. Some great coverage there that they can see. And let's focus on the Dynamo in this podcast. It wasn't the year they were hoping for, especially Paul Nagamura last
No,
year.
no, that was a
So
quick
yeah, it
that
was
was a quick year, 8 months.
it's definitely not what Pat Onstad, who got his first chance to like get this club set up. Year one was quite rushed, as we've said in our previous chat, how everything was left almost. He came in and so much needed to be done in preparation in such a short period of time. He's taken his time this off season, and now the Ben Olsen era begins. Tell us a little bit about the sort of the first impressions of him coming into the city and what his ideas for the club are looking like.
Yeah. Well, first, I think we have to backtrack a little bit, right, and go to like what you were saying. Nagamura was the first hire for Pat Onstad. It was Onstad's first year as general manager. Obviously, the
Yeah,
club legend coming into the executive office, if you could put
yeah,
it that way. And a lot of people were kind of puzzled, right? I mean, 8 months. I mean, why cut the process short? Seemed like things weren't going on the field. The team wasn't progressing as the team would have liked. But I think also behind the scenes, maybe there wasn't as much of agreement between the general manager or the technical, staff of the sporting director's office and the way things were coming out on the field, right? Um, so they pull the plug. Here comes Ben Olsen, who we know had previously worked with Pat Onstad. Onstad actually, when he retired, was Olsen's goalkeeper coach at DC United, and then obviously went on to Toronto and then Columbus Crew. So there's some more familiarity there, right, between
mm,
Onstad and Olsen, which I think has to play a big part into why Olsen got hired. It does seem like things are more on the same page as far as those two departments this season coming
yeah,
in. There does seem to be, and I don't know if maybe this is just the fact that maybe a year later there's less or there's more wiggle room with what they can do as far as transactions, but there is at least more support as far as signings, and it does seem to be more faith in the manager here. There are reports also out there that maybe Olsen was a candidate, the previous year and didn't get
oh,
the
okay.
job, and then maybe now they finally got the guy they wanted, right?
Mm,
But ultimately, I think that fate, that friendship, right, kind of plays into um, who knows? Maybe this is Onstad's second and last hire as a head coach, so he's going all into somebody he knows. They're also betting on somebody that whatever you know people may think of his experience, like the fact that he's gone to the playoffs and that he's gotten a team there. That plays in Ben Olsen's favor. Maybe
yeah.
he's a bridge coach. Maybe he's a coach for the long term. I think that's to be seen. But I think all these things play into Olsen. He's also a very charismatic guy, a guy known well in the league for his playing days, and I think that also plays a part of personality as well to kind of win people over. They're hoping maybe that'll motivate some players as well.
Yeah, it must be. Yeah, it must be important. The link. Obviously, there's been too many breakdowns last year between, from the pitch all the way up to Pat Onstad. So I guess making sure he's got that person that he has a lot of faith in going into the season, plays a huge part in the hire, like you mentioned. And he's also completely rechanged the back office. We've seen like Brendan Burke's come in, Aurelian Colleen,
Right.
Tim Hanley. There's so many people who've come in behind the scenes as well, that it almost gives it a little bit more of a complete sort of refresh. And maybe they, I mean, I can only imagine they will get a bit more time than Paul Nagamura to
Right.
really change what
No,
they're trying to
and I
do.
think you hit it on the head. I think there's been a lot of changes in the staff. There's been talk about resources. You know, Olsen in his press conference talked about, you know, he liked the idea of coming here because he'd have additional resources, not just on the field, but also in a support staff. You know, promised by the owner here in Houston and Satsigo. And I think that's kind of the support also I'm talking about, when, you know, it's not just on the field, because people say, well, Nagamura got Victor Herrera and he got Sebastian Ferreira, and those were two big signings. But it's also, you know, like you mentioned, a full staff. Nagamura got, you know, maybe two assistant coaches, a goalkeeper coach, kind of brand new, a bunch of guys that were maybe not as experienced. You know, I think there may be a little bit there with the way Olsen's staff is made up, but I think they got an additional assistant coach, right? Maybe that plays a little bit of a factor. There's a director of methodology now. You know, I mentioned there's several other key positions around the club that now, you know, the academy has had some turnover as well. The academy staff, Dynamo 2, obviously, second year kind of getting integrated. So there is a lot more. I don't know if unity is the right word, but there is a lot more, and like you said, change in the entire building, as far as the staff, as far as bringing new faces in, maybe more experienced people. And again, we'll see if this all translates. And it definitely seems to be something built for the long term, as opposed to maybe last year, where it was kind of, all right, let's put this together, let's see how it goes, and then, you know, they just kind of, again, it was easy to pull the plug in 8 months and start a refresh.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all kicks off at the start of the year. And with the fans coming back into the stadium, come the new 2023 season. We spoke before about like the culture of the team and the city, and building like sort of the links that they're competing obviously with a number of other big clubs in different sports. And is there a sign of the greater links being built and the more of a buzz around the city looking forward to this new season?
I think not as much as, really hard, not as much as people would like to see. I think the Herrera thing has gotten more attention, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's bringing more people into the stadium, and obviously they've done some remodeling to the stadium last year. This offseason they've added they remodeled a whole new side of the stadium. There's also new naming rights just announced, so they are new seats as well, which has been, you know, for my taste, it's been more. The seats have been getting more run than you know, maybe promoting some of your stars like Herrera and Ferreira, right?
Yeah.
But it talks about, you know, they really want to hammer home that the fan experience, the gaming experience, at the stadium is going to be, you know, something that, you know, people are going to want to come out, get good value for their ticket. Because of the Apple deal coming into MLS this year, all the game times are essentially 7:30 at night. So maybe that'll help with the Houston Heat and keeping fans coming back. So I think there is, you know, trying to give fans, the casual fan, right, a good value for their ticket. It does seem like the supporters group relationship continues to you know, hopefully they're trying to till the soil there and get a better atmosphere in the stadium. But as far as the big buzz, I think they still got work to do. In the marketing department, they did put a couple billboards, you know, last year, as far as when Herrera kind of came in. But I think, as far as kind of managing that consistently and getting more people to kind of stay on, and of course, results are a big part of that too. So that's also, you know, one thing they're banking on. But I think, certainly there could be more commercials and all that kind of media.
Yeah, I guess wins bring fans, don't they? When it comes to the casual fan, if you see your team winning, then you're going to pay that little extra to come along and get in the stadium. And I mean, I don't know if I'm like making a story that isn't one, but Ben Olsen's had a great opportunities in DC United, especially where he's brought a club who maybe weren't expected to achieve quite as much as they did at times, and works hard and gets teams motivated. Is there going to be a big shift with like you mentioned, the climate in Houston and the way he's going to be able to set his team out. Is he got a lot to learn and a lot to adapt to coming from sort of DC to Houston?
I think Olsen's teams were known to be pragmatic in DC. I think maybe that plays into it. I don't know here, but what has been said, they want to be a more attractive team. They want to be a more attacking team. He said he's going to get the pieces here to kind of implement that. And Onstad has been, and that's the thing too. When with the coaching change, right? Onstad has mentioned that's the style he wants. He's now willing to negotiate that. So I think when part of that wasn't done with Nagamura, that's part of the reason also that played into that decision, right? So that's the hope that Olsen will kind of make us a more attacking style team, kind of suffocate teams here in the Houston Heat. But of course, that's been said before with Nagamura, with Tab Ramos before him, with Puma Cabrera before him. It's sort of always been the idea of the Houston Dynamo to want to do that, or at least that's been the speech, and then implementing it on the field has always kind of been a bit of a tougher task. So that will be the challenge, and I think that's kind of what everybody hopes. But I think, and also, the lack of resources gets mentioned with Ben Olsen. I keep bringing up because I think two important players are Luciano Acosta and Wayne Rooney. Olsen had him at the tail end of his career in DC. Obviously, Acosta was a more attractive style of play. I don't think he has anybody here that sort of resembles the talent of those two kind of guys, right?
Yeah.
With all due respect to Herrera and Ferreira. So I'm interested to see, maybe as a collective, they can put something like that together. Obviously, the problem last year was Ferreira not getting as much service. They brought in an old teammate of his from down in Paraguay, in Ivan Franco. And obviously, year 2 for Hector Herrera. So maybe they have mentioned they want to use him more as a number 8, higher up the field. So we'll see if that plays into the attack. But I think that is the biggest question mark for this Houston Dynamo.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned Hector Herrera wanting to get him more further forward. Let's talk about some of these new signings that have come in. Artur has come in from the Columbus Crew, an experienced midfielder. Again, not an attacking midfielder, so someone who will probably come in and sit a little bit deeper to push Hector Herrera forward. And Ivan Franco, like you mentioned, he's from Libertad in Paraguay, good friends with Sebas Ferreira, which must help with him in his sort of happiness in the club and in the city for someone coming from abroad. And you're adding these players.
They're not able to add him as a designated player, so they got him on a loan deal with the purchase option, and that's kind of the way they've been able to fit him in there, because that is the one big challenge for Houston in this offseason is it has a designated player. I believe Teenage Adebe is going to be the designated player this season as well. It was talked about maybe it was Coco or him. But one of those contracts going to get bought down with the target allocation money. So Halebe, and then the other one was obviously Sebastián Ferreira. So with those 3 spots locked up, there wasn't a lot that you can say, well, how are they going to, better this squad? And that's, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I've seen Franco playing in the Libertadores down here. He's exciting winger who should bring a little bit of some pace, which I guess you've lost with Fafa Pico leaving.
Right.
So it's a much different style of player, but another one with a lot of pace that could be quite exciting, and someone who's not quite hit the levels I think a lot of people thought he might have done, but it's still been at a great sort of level enough that Houston can now take this gamble on a loan, especially, and say we think we can get you over the top to be performing at what we expect.
I just hope it's not too much pressure on the kid, right? Franco, he's a 22-year-old, and if people maybe with the price tag that comes along with him, I think it's around 3.5 million, the purchase option. Is he going to be expected to be that difference maker for Houston to kind of create? Obviously, Quintero is another. Not that he was contributing loads and loads of goals, right? But I think when you mentioned some of the departures, right? I think those are the kind of guys that have left, and how are you going to? Where is the creativity going to come from on this team? Let's also talk about additional signings, which are yet to kind of be added here. But again, with the lack of being able to add a bona fide player, a true designated player, how much pressure is going to be on some of these younger guys, some of these additions to kind of perform? And is it fair to kind of hold them up to that standard and say, hey, I mean, should these guys be thought of more as contributors, as bench players, or are they out and out starters, and can they produce big time numbers? Because I think we saw with Ferreira last year, he provided like 12, 13 goals, and that was remarkable for the service that he had. But for a lot of people, it's like, well, that's not good enough. They need to get more out of him, right, for this Houston team to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, and it's I'm looking around at some of the other signings. Achara has come in from Toronto on the re-entry draft and forward there. But otherwise, it's looking at sort of the other end of the pitch. Franco Escobar has just come in from LAFC. He's a great right back. Has got an exciting signing there. A left back, you brought in Brad Smith after losing Adam Lundqvist to Austin FC. So a big departure to a rival club. Brad Smith, who watching Seattle last year, they missed him in the attacking phase, but he was in DC United. I mean, they had all their own problems, so it's very hard to judge him completely on what happened there. But maybe defensively, he wasn't the greatest, but a decent level MLS player. But it's not quite the replacement you maybe would have hoped for from Lundqvist.
I think because of the injury, right? He is. I think he's coming off an ACL injury with DC, so that puts kind of big question mark next to him, right? I agree with you. I liked him in Seattle. I think maybe money wise they had to move him on, right? It didn't make sense maybe to keep him on the salary they had him on at that time. And when I initially saw them bring him in, I thought, oh, this is going to be a good competition for Lundqvist, who sort of lacked that here in Houston. Somebody that can actually challenge him for that starting lineup spot, right? And then Lundqvist gets traded. It obviously gets revealed. The technical director, Asher Mendelson, talks about what Lundqvist had asked for maybe a trade. And so that's why they went and got Brad Smith. As of now, what we're doing here about a month before the season, Brad Smith's training separately. I should mention that. So Lundqvist, like you mentioned, has been moved on to Austin FC. So I think there is a question now who's going to be the left back on against FC Cincinnati in that opening game. I will mention, while we're on the subject, Doro Farson's also training separately, so that might be a bit of a question mark up in the attack as far as Ferreira having to carry the load of the goals at the beginning of the year. And I think there is a question mark also with Nelson Quiñones, who's on loan from Colombia, from Once Caldas. Maybe another option out in the wing. We didn't get to see much of him last year, and obviously he's only here for half the year. But I've seen him maybe a little bit limited this preseason, and that's another question mark too as far as options.
Yeah, so I mean, it appears that there'll be still a relatively busy off season, but like you say, there's no DP spot to be able to use. Like the options that are available to Houston are kind of limited in some way, in quite a lot of ways.
Like to go back to your point, like I like the Smith signing. Like I said, the only thing that worries me is kind of the injury part of it, and but where I also go back to this team in prior years, actually, the problem is always kind of in depth. And I know you can go around MLS teams and kind of who really has a truly big deep squad, right? But for Houston especially, because the problem has been like you say, here the dog days of summer, right? June, July, August, and especially when that schedule gets more compressed, you have maybe 2 games a week. That's sort of when Houston's come undone during the season, and that's been the test. So not having a squad to kind of be able to compete during that part of the schedule, that's been the key. So that's why I kind of look at that spot. The Escobar signing, I think that's ideally what you want, right? You had a guy like Griffin Dorsey last year, who can come off the bench, give you some great moments, but then you got a bona fide starter in front of him that has won MLS Cups and Franco Escobar. And I mean, if they can get that at every position, this would be a hell of a team.
Yeah, it looks like.
And you mentioned Arthur, like real quick, right? Like Arthur comes from Columbus. That's another one where I thought, man, if you put him next to Vera, now that's some competition at that spot. But now Vera's been loaned off to Argentinos, so it's sort of, I mean, there's some good moves, but it's also in relation to the depth, where does the team stand?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you mentioned, Vera's gone back on loan back to Argentinos Juniors. Memo Rodriguez has gone, and Tim Parker was one of the bigger ones that went to St. Louis earlier on in the off season. So for all these players that are coming in, there's 1 or 2 that have left from that position. So I guess it suggests that there's still moves to be made, and that cap space is being created for these players to come in, but with the lack of flexibility and where you can go, I guess that provides that little bit of nervousness around the club.
Right. With the lack of a designated player, like I said, you can't truly maybe bring a big star, but they're hoping that, with all this general allocation money that they're getting from other teams, right? Tim Parker left, and they got a million salary off the books, but they also got some of it back as far in general allocation money. Lundqvist went for I think $500,000 in general allocation. So over 2 years, right? I mean, there's some of these things to consider. So I guess they're kind of piling up this money, hoping they can bring some other players that way. But yeah, I think they need to fill some spots for sure, kind of all over the roster. There is a recurring theme here, right? Also, like I mentioned, maybe Pat Onstad going a little to just what he knows, and I think there is something to be said for that as well. Arthur, ex-Columbus Crew, won the MLS Cup while Pat Onstad was part of staff there. They brought Andrew Tarbell as a backup goalkeeper from Austin, let him go. So that's another ex-Columbus Crew guy that was on a championship team. Brad Smith maybe coming through DC. Maybe that's an Olsen link. Onstad was also at DC as well. So there is kind of, these links. Obviously, Ferreira and now Ivan Franco, two guys that were scouted by Onstad or by Columbus while Onstad was there. And that's kind of, helped kind of, progress that along. They obviously have the same agents, so maybe that's already some things that help, all these little links. But yeah, I think kind of the theme every year, good additions, but where do they stand in relation to the rest of the Western Conference, which is pretty competitive, and I think still they have work to do there.
So as we think about these, then what are you expecting as someone who reports on the club that their next sort of steps will be in the transfer market? Where are the key positions now? Obviously, we just mentioned there's only the one left back, and he's not even training with the squad. So you'd imagine a second maybe will be bringing in as a competitor, or but there's these other areas that around the pitch that need to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the question here for a month out from the season. I would imagine maybe a guy like Sam Junko, who was on the team last year that hasn't been re-signed, maybe that's an option to kind of bring back, or looking around the league, maybe seeing somewhere else. But yeah, I think they still need a few better players or depth, at least in the defensive line. I do think in the midfield, really the big question to me is where's the creativity going to come from? Because if ideally the midfield you're looking at right now is Victor Araiza with Carrasquilla and right behind them Arthur, right? So that kind of seems like a very defensive. Not that Herrera and Carrasquilla can't go up and help, but I think the quality of those players are kind of better suited to help you a little bit more defensively. And if you have an attacking player, kind of have that as an outlet. Maybe that means that Ivan Franco kind of moves inside. I mean, I guess we've sort of seen that, right, with Libertad. So I think these are all kind of the questions that everybody's kind of wondering. What's the formation going to be? Is it going to kind of still be a 4-3-3? Is it going to be a form of maybe a 4-4-2? Again, the only thing maybe sure up top right now, it seems to be Sebastián Ferreira. What does that mean for Corey Baird, who they've retained and they obviously believe in? Is he going to still be used as a winger, or could they bring him up? And I think plenty to see here, right, from Ben Olsen. We'll see how he puts it together and see how he kind of makes this work. And I think that'll be the big question. So, but it's a big challenge. I mean, I think again, you're getting a lot of new pieces. You kind of trying to put it together, and you're competing against teams that are already established. Seattle, Portland, the two LA teams. I mean, there's Salt Lake, who's always kind of seems to be consistent in the Western Conference. Maybe Colorado with Robin Frazier. So I don't know. Are there 7 teams that are better off than the Houston Dynamo? I mean, that seems like right now you could make a list, but yeah, at least seems to be kind of moving the way they wanted to, in the direction they want to, and that's that's ultimately the question for the workout.
Yeah, like we were saying before we started recording, it was that those links between the different lines is what's been the difficulty for Houston, like a big difficulty for Houston. You can you've got these players that can win the ball, and you've got midfielders who are good at like competitors, but haven't been able to get linked up with a front three fluidly enough to really cause like a regular threat. And the additions that are coming in seem to suggest could well be a similar system once again. And those players in the centre of midfield aren't the most creative. You haven't got anyone that's like a
Right.
number 10 that some of these other teams
Yeah.
have that are so dangerous.
And there's talks, like there's rumors, right? Some players that they might be bringing in, maybe could fill that role, and I think that's to be seen. But otherwise, as it's built today, that's the key question, right? And we go back to what's the job here for Ben Olsen, and Onstad's been hammering. He wants attractive soccer. He wants a proactive style of soccer. Can you accomplish that with some of these players? I think you got some good players to work off of, right? Ferreira. You got to get more from Victor Araiza this year, and certainly if they want to push him a little bit higher off the field, can he be that type of player to consistently be an attacking outlet for you? I think he certainly has the qualities. I don't know if that's certainly the best position where you want to play him, but I think maybe we'll be surprised this year and see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And we're talking about like the culture of the club, and I remember talking to you before about Brooklyn Reigns got his start, came off the bench last season. There's a bit excitement about this new young player coming in through the academy, but obviously he wasn't one that was developed by Houston themselves. He's come across slightly older and made his way through. Ben Bartlett is the new head of methodology there. He's come over from Fulham. He's got a good reputation in England as a developer of young players. And is that something that do you think we'll start to see more of this year, of young players trying to break their way in, especially with sort of an expanded season?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
No, look, Brooklyn, obviously, like you mentioned, he was in the Barcelona Academy over in Arizona. They got it right in Salt Lake last year, and by MLS rules, there was a certain number of months or training hours or something like that where they had to accomplish before they can move into the first team. That's been completed. He got his debut last year near the end of the season. So he's one of the players that people are obviously excited about. Probably might get minutes this year. And then I think you'll have, a few from Dynamo too here and there that'll kind of come up. Of course, they lost Marcelo Palomino, one of the academy guys, for a long time. He's gone over to, I think, second division in Norway. But I think from the guys from Dynamo too that you can sort of maybe move up now, I think that's the one guy you're looking at, and seeing who else gets minutes. As you mentioned, the academy, I think it's no secret, right down here. It's been the big point of emphasis. Why haven't they been able to produce players? You see what FC Dallas is doing, Philadelphia, Salt Lake, New York Red Bulls, Seattle, some of the LA teams, and what other teams have done in MLS. Houston hasn't been able to necessarily get much out of the ground here when you have guys like Chris Richards, who's now playing in the Premier League, kind of passed through here. So I think that's one of the big behind the scenes changes that is going on. There's been some turnover at the academy. I don't think it's official, but or the club hasn't posted anything officially, but families have been let know that Paul Hollacker, the academy director, has been moved on. And so that's going to be a key piece. Who comes in to be the academy director, or how is the academy gonna be managed, and how soon can they kind of start developing MLS talent? I think that's obviously, for different reasons, right? For income, for generating players that can contribute minutes. I mean, that's going to be a key piece that hasn't been used. And if they can sort of get that going, I mean, that's going to be a big piece for the future that's finally being worked on. Wasn't maybe the priority in the first year of Pat Onstad's time here, but now I think I think that's the biggest change for the long term that's being done right now.
And I know it's early on the 17th of January, so there's still plenty of time to go in this off season, moves to be made and things like that. But the way that Pat Onstad is changing everything on both sides, on and off the pitch, is there the thought that you can see that Houston are working in a progressive route to improve on what happened last year, or is there still so many question marks over this team?
No, I think so. I think for a lot of years there wasn't change, and a lot of it, I think, credit to Onstad, and he's been making the decisions, but the other side of it is the key part here has been the ownership. Ted Siegel has kind of brought in a much needed, or at least from the outside looking in, right, appears to have brought in a much needed internal pressure that this club has not had. So when you talk about that change in culture, that's a big part of it. I mean, people can talk, and I think people have said it before. We got to change the culture. Tab Ramos said it. Nagamura said it.
Yeah.
Right? They all wanted to change the culture, but they couldn't. Right? It was, and it kind of overtook them. They're now on to different things. And to me, that change always had to come from the top, and it's now being implemented.
Yeah.
And Onstad has been back to make some of these moves that are necessary, and we'll see if it all pays off and if these are the right moves. But I think at least there is some turnover, and fans have asked for a clean slate. And I think that when you talk about, over the years when fans have kind of moved away from the club, canceled, their season tickets, part of that has been because of the lack of change, because of just, keeping the status quo and moving in the same direction and not wanting to mess things up, right? Now at least you see some sort of change, and like, again, we'll see if it pays off for the club.
Definitely, yeah. It does seem like it's not just one person trying to change everything by themselves. There seems to be a bit more of a sort of consistent effort to be to create something new. And yeah, it'd be very interesting to see. I'm sure you'll be looking forward to the season ahead and covering the team. Thank you again so much for joining us today. Good luck with the rest of the season and everything. Remind everyone where they can get all the information on Houston throughout the year from you.
Yeah, thestriker.com. That's where you can kind of go in and see some of these changes. We'll have a couple pieces on a little more in depth here, right? Because like we mentioned, staff changes, but also not just the technical staff, the medical staff, some of the backroom stuff. Big exciting times. We'll see if it does turn out into that culture change that Houston wants.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Victor. I look forward to speaking to you again a little bit into the season and see what some of these effects have been.
Yeah, sure thing. Anytime.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.